I got the wrong. I got a different shirt on. Ooh,
New black Wall Street book club. Evan Jefferson, brother, much love. Educating, elevating, because in knowledge is the power and we'll never give it up. Literature's for the masses. Where to put your money down, now how to watch your assets. Yeah, uplifting others is a passion. My brother Evan, he will turn it into action. New Black Wall Street book club. You should come read with us. Yeah, we comprehend and discuss. If we all just come together, there's no limit for us. Here comes your host, New Black Wall Street. Evan, take it away. New Black Wall Street book club.
Hey, good evening to you, Miss Vivian, Miss Audrey. Thanks so much for joining us here tonight on New Black Wall Street Book Club, where Black folk do read. If you put in a book, we absolutely will find it. We got 3 books we'll be going through here tonight in our Black History series. We have your African American Inventions that changed the world. We'll be getting into a new inventor tonight. We have your Black History Reader, 101 Questions That You Never Thought to Ask by Mr. Dr. Claud Anderson. And also our main text tonight will be Defining Moments in History, Reading Between the Lines by the late, great Dick Gregory. I'm your host, ERGJ, your certified financial educator and CEO of ERGJ Enterprises, ERGJ Black Bazaar, and international best-selling author of the book, The Black Billionaires Club. That book there is a study of Black wealth. It's a study of the 12 richest Black people in the world today and how they built their wealth. And I just truly believe that if you want to be wealthy, you should study wealthy people. Well, you can find that book by simply going to the website, theblackbillionairesclub.com. You see that here on the screen, theblackbillionairesclub.com. Check out the website. Pick up the book today. Our sponsors here tonight start with Big Sis Media. Big Sis Media is a full service creative design agency that has been built to be able to help you to communicate with audience through your visual and digital media. So if you're needing assistance, maybe getting a website done or getting a trailer done or anything, digital flyers, anything like that, well, you want to reach out to Big Sis Media and get the help that you need, because they're there to watch over your most critical needs, creative needs, like a Big Sis would. You can go check out the website at bigsismediagroup.com, bigsismediagroup.com. Other sponsors for tonight, ERGJ Black Bazaar, the Afrocentric marketplace, specialized in Afrocentric home decor, personal care products, and also Black art-inspired gifts. Check out the website at www.theblackbazaar.com, www.theblackbazaar.com. Shower curtains, tapestries, home decor, personal care products, all that good stuff. Black art-inspired gifts, all that you can find. If you're going to shop Black. You can do that very easily at ERGJ Black Bazaar, okay? ERGJ Black Bazaar. Hey, give us a like and a share if you care. Like and share if you care. You know some people that's out there that's been looking for some great quality content. We're getting into Black History tonight. Also put in the comments on Black History. We are covering Black History tonight as we continue along in our journey into our series. I believe this is part 5. We do have a goal that we're looking to reach as well, guys. That's going to be our goal of 1,000 YouTube subscribers. So if you have not already, please go over to YouTube and hit the subscribe button, which would be for the page ERGJ Enterprises, okay? ERGJ Enterprises. So I'm not going to delay, guys. Going to get right into our Black History series here tonight. I'm just super excited about to continue to learn what I do not know, what I did not learn growing up. I'm always be learning is one of those things, is one of those mantras that I kind of stand by. So I really like the series that we're in, which is the Black History series, okay? So we're going to start with our inventor of the night. This comes out of the book African American Inventions That Changed the World by Mr. Michael A. Carson. And our inventor of the night is a brother I had not heard of until tonight. Maybe you have. I did not. His name is Otis Boykin. Otis Boykin. So let's find out a little bit about Mr. Boykin, what he did, what he's done, his inventions. We'll start there. So Otis Boykin has 26 patents to his name. That's interesting. His most noteworthy invention was a control unit that would be later used for pacemakers. He also invented a wire precision resistor that will later be used in radios and televisions and computers. Boykin was inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame in 2014. So Otis Boykin, 26 patents. That's pretty impressive. An inventor himself, a wire precision resistor, and a control unit that will later be used in pacemakers. So Otis Boykin was born in 1920. And he passed in 1982, means he was 62 years old. He was born August 29th of 1920 in Dallas, Texas. He attended Fisk College in Nashville, Tennessee. He later moved to Chicago and attended the Illinois Institute of Technology. After graduation, he accepted a position with P.J. Nielsen Research Laboratories while also trying to start his own business. Boykin later decided to work for himself as an inventor. He set out to work on a project that he once contemplated while he was in college. He developed a special talent in working with resistors. Resistors slow the flow of electricity, allowing a safe amount of electricity to move through a device. Here's his invention. In 1959, Boykin invented a wire precision resistor. This device allowed specific amounts of electrical currents to flow for a specific purpose. He also created another type of resistor that could withstand shifts in temperature and air pressure. All of his resistors led to huge breakthroughs, allowing electronic devices to become affordable as well as more reliable than ever before. His inventions were in great demand. He received hundreds of orders for consumer electronic manufacturers, United States Armed Forces, as well as IBM. Boykin had 26 patents to his name. The resistors that he created were used in products like radios, televisions, computers, and also military missiles. His most noteworthy invention was a control unit that is used in pacemakers, which are small devices that doctors implant in the human body to help the heart beat normally. Boykin's invention allowed the pacemaker to be more precisely regulated. It is responsible for saving hundreds of thousands of lives every year. So Otis Boykin, one of those inventors that never came up in Black History Month. So I'm learning about him now. Mr. Otis Boykin, 1920 to 1982, the control unit for pacemakers and a wire precision resistor that lots of orders from even from the military itself. 26 patents to his name. Tonight on the New Black Wall Street Book Club, we put your name, Mr. Otis Boykin. We put some respect on your name. So that's our inventor of the night, African American inventions that changed the world. And clearly, Otis Boykin created some inventions that changed the world. That changed the world. Good evening to you, Miss Phyllis George. Thanks so much for joining. So now we're going to get to our question, our social question of the night. This is a 101 question that you never thought to ask a Black history reader out of the book that written by Dr. Claud Anderson. Dr. Claud Anderson, is widely, very well known. Powernomics, Black Labor, White Wealth, and he wrote this book, Black History Reader, which is he has 101 questions in this book that you never thought to ask. And so our question for tonight that he is going to cover is about Dr. Martin Luther King. Here's our question. Did Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s colorblind dream take the focus off Black rights? What a question. Did Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s colorblind dream take the focus off Black rights? What's going on, Ryan Scott? Greetings to you tonight. Thanks so much for joining. Guys, hit the like button, share button if you care. Like button, share button if you care. Miss Sweetness, what's going on, lady? How you doing? Doing a little Black history tonight, Black history reading on the New Black Wall Street Book Club. Did Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s colorblind dream take the focus off Black rights? Let's read. Put on my Dr. Claud Anderson hat. Whew, so technical. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s principle of color blindness diverted Blacks from prioritizing their own group self-interest and guided them backwards to being altruistic, thinking first of others. His shift from Black to color blindness reversed the long fight of Black leaders to draw a singular focus to their own group. In that respect, Dr. King's altruism took Blacks back to the way they had to think when they were slaves. When the Civil War and slavery ended in 1860, Black ex-slaves had an opportunity for something they had long prayed for, a chance to place their own group self-interest first. For centuries, they were denied the right to have personal or Black group self-interest. The sole focus of a slave's life was to care for the master, his interest, and to view the world through the master's eyes only. During slavery, some Blacks did fight for Black rights. The strength of their advocacy varied from the extremely aggressive efforts of Nat Turner and Gabriel Prosser and Denmark Vesey to mild advocates like Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, and Booker T. Washington. After slavery ended, Black activists hoped they would be able to direct their energies and resources to benefit their own people. However, that was not to be. The Civil War ended in 1865. Reconstruction lasted about 10 years, ending about 1875. As that period ended, the dominant white society issued laws and public policies that socio-economically bridled Black group self-interest. They were limited in the kinds of businesses and schools they could operate. Black candidates for public office were instructed to speak in generalities. They cannot speak out in the interest of Blacks or hold whites accountable for past injustices. Around 1915, a pro-Blackness period finally did emerge and lasted for a full generation. W.E.B. Du Bois began advocating Black-based politics. Marcus Garvey advocated Black economics. Carter G. Woodson emphasized Black education. Elijah Muhammad organized the Black Muslims, and Black entertainers and artists pushed Blackness through the Harlem Renaissance. The increased focus of Blackness resulted in the rise of Black leaders who, in 1928, petitioned the federal government to codify Black self-interest by passing a Negro Bill of Rights. Their intent was to recognize and focus public attention to relieving the historical legacies that kept Blacks fixed at the lowest rung of society's social hierarchy. In the late 1950s, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., a 28-year-old Black preacher, burst into the nation's conscience and became the leader of the Civil Rights Movement, which was focused singularly on Black issues at the time. As time went on, however, the movement lost focus. Dr. King was the first Black leader to convert Black problems into a broad category of minority issues, which included gender, ethnicity, language, religion, handicap status, and poverty classes. Thomas E. Woods Jr., in his book, 33 Questions About American History, pointed out and discussed how Dr. King proposed that the nation institute a Bill of Rights for the disadvantaged, not a Bill of Rights for Black Americans. The term disadvantage became synonymous with minority and equated government-instituted slavery to contemporary issues such as poverty and gender and immigration. Instead of framing the focus of his work to long-suffering Black Americans, Dr. King's euphemism of disadvantage opened the door to a myriad of ambiguous groups that made the case that they too had suffered institutional mistreatment, deprivation, and exploitation. Dr. King's actions started Black America down the slippery slope of competition with fabricated minority issues in 1960 when he said, "We're going to take this movement and reach out to the poor people in all directions in this country, into the Southeast after the Native Indians, into the West after the Chicanos, into Appalachia for poor whites, and into the ghettos after the Negroes and the Puerto Ricans. And we're going to bring them together and enlarge this campaign into something bigger than just a civil rights movement for Negroes." When Dr. King folded poverty, class, gender, ethnicity, and language groupings into the Black civil rights movement, he effectively destroyed the movement for Blacks. It took away the issues of their exceptionality in society, issues that had never been fully addressed nor remedied. The unique historical experiences of Black Americans became synonymous with our minorities, multiculturalism, diversity, people of color, and poor people. These, of course, off-course issues confused racial issues with class issues. Dr. King's redirection of the nation's attention to poor people and other oppressed people of the world put Black Americans on the back seat of the bus and voluntarily reversed the course of Black self-interest to the days when they were denied the right to even have a group self-interest. He and the movement became broadly focused on everyone, all people, and everything except Black rights. Dr. King's actions absolved whites of any need to fulfill the requirement of the 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution to lift the burdens and incidences of slavery from the shoulders of Black people. The nation's attention continues to shift more comfortably toward class and gender groups, leaving the legacies of slavery and Jim Crow segregation proportionately unchanged between whites and Blacks. The concept of color blindness did indeed take the focus off Black rights. Whether that is a positive or negative depends upon the perch on which you sit. So everybody put it also self-interest. So it's an interesting take here, again, from Claud Anderson, asking and answering the question, did Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s color-blinded dream take the focus off Black rights? 101 questions that you never thought to ask, and our brother, Dr. Claud Anderson, has no problem trying to answer for us, okay? Has no problem trying to answer for us. So, guys, we've this is our Black History series. We've had our Inventor of the Night, which was Otis Boykin, 26 patents, some type of resistor that he created, brought great value to society as we know it today. And we had our question of the night, our social question or political question of the night from Dr. Claud Anderson. Did Martin Luther King Jr.'s colorblind dream take the focus off Black rights? Of course, that's something for us to debate. Negative or positive, you take the ball and run with it. But interesting take from Dr. Claud Anderson, nonetheless. Good evening to you guys over Instagram. Thanks so much for joining. So we are going to get into the meat of our reading here tonight on the New Black Wall Street Book Club. Now I got to change hats again because we're going to be going into Dick Gregory, the late, great Dick Gregory, reading the book Defining Moments in History, Reading Between the Lies. Yesterday, we finished up chapter 1, so we'll be getting into chapter 2 tonight. And chapter 2 is called Solidarity. Solidarity is the title for chapter 2. Now, if you've been following along with us, you know Dick Gregory, he writes and talks different, so it's a lot more fluid and open. So let's just kind of let's just get into our fun mode because Dick Gregory is pretty cool and pretty unique and pretty fun. What's going on, brother? Nomadic Pain up in our Solidarity. Let's read. Free people are the ones with enough money to control the information the rest of us get. Let me read that again, man. Dick Gregory said, man, free people are the ones with enough money to control the information the rest of us get. We can't believe in others. We have to believe in, we can't believe in others. We have to believe in Black solidarity. The point is we can have help from white folks, but we can't rely on them. We have to organize ourselves. We've done so in the past, and we need to do it some more. In this section, I highlight ways in which Blacks have organized and produced great outcomes. So this chapter is going to be all about organizations, Black organizations. I can see that happening here, and what we've done to be in solidarity with one another. So our first organization that he's going to talk about in his book is going to be the Atlanta Compromise. This is between W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington. Of course, this is Dick Gregory's take on history itself. But this brother was a very wise, very well-read, very researched guy. Let's get it. So W.B. Du Bois, Booker T. Washington, and the Atlanta Compromise. Here's something that might seem strange. At the same time that some white folks were making things tough for Black people in the South, other white folks couldn't throw money at Blacks fast enough. Most of the money had to do with education. Some of the rich folks giving out all the money, the philanthropists did it partly out of the goodness of their hearts. Some of them were church folks and were just trying to do their Christian duty. But some of them, especially the ones in the North, figured it this way. If folks in the South, including Black folks, got enough education to get good jobs, they could pay their fair share of taxes. See there? Well, half of what goes on in life, if you dig down to the bottom, you see what it's all about. You find the money. With the other half, you find sex, but that's a different story. Here's how strange it was. After slavery came, a dozen years of Reconstruction, and it seemed like a new day for Black folks in the South. Because there were federal troops ensuring our rights. Blacks could vote and run for office with little trouble, and there were even Black senators and congressmen down South. Then came the presidential election of 1876. It was a close one. It looked like a Democrat, Samuel Tilden, had more votes in the Electoral College than the Republican Rutherford B. Hayes. Some said otherwise, because the vote in a few states was so close that nobody knew whom the state's electoral votes were going to. There wasn't a presidential election like that again until 24 years later, when George W. Bush ran against Al Gore in 2000. Finally, the Democrats said, okay, look here. Y'all can have the election, no problem. You just have to do us one favor. Take these federal troops out of the South, the ones y'all got down here making sure blacks can vote and get elected to office. Let us deal with our black people our way. The Republicans said, cool. And that's how the compromise of 1877 happened. Hayes became president, and just about the first thing he did was remove the troops from the South, and just like that, Reconstruction was over. Now, here's the strange part. Rutherford B. Hayes, the man who became president on the condition that he pulled the federal troops out of the South and end Reconstruction, that same man later helped run a fund that helped a dozen schools train black teachers. Isn't that some crazy stuff? Even after the government pulled the federal troops out of the South, and even after blacks got chased out of Congress with white dudes in hoods 2 steps behind them, and even when some blacks were getting locked up just for looking white folks in the eye, while all that was happening, black folks were going to school. If they couldn't do anything else for them, poor black parents were at least able to send their kids to school. One of those little black kids was young Booker T. Washington. He was born in Virginia of 1856 as a slave. Then, after emancipation, he went to school at the Hampton Institute in Virginia. That school was run by General Samuel Chapman Armstrong, and that's who gave old Booker T the main idea he didn't let go of for the rest of his life. It was all about work. If you were working, you were staying out of trouble. The more work you did, the better you got at it. And the better you got at it, the more money you made, and the prouder you felt. The prouder you felt, the more you stayed out of trouble because you didn't want to mess it all up doing some low-down mess. The more you made, the more property you would have, and the more property you had, the more you would have to keep and protect. So the harder you worked, the harder you'd work. For Booker T, it all started and ended with work. Booker T. Washington believed that for black folks in the South, which is where most of them were at the time, the key was to find work that white folks needed done. That way, black folks would be useful to other people. And when other people needed you, you survived. Not just that, if black folks showed white folks we could work and be trusted, if we proved that our presence was good for white people, the whites might just let up on us and treat us like ordinary folks instead of animals. What kind of work did white folks need done? Farming and other manual labor, stuff like that. See, Booker T was all for blacks getting educated as long as we got taught to do practical stuff. General Armstrong recommended Booker T to head up the Tuskegee Institute, a school in Alabama for black folks that got started in the 1880s. Booker ran Tuskegee for the rest of his life. He gave his ideas a spotlight. He thought the most important thing was for blacks to get themselves together economically, racial equality, fighting for voting rights, integration with whites. The way Booker T saw it, all that could wait. It was more important to work. You best believe white people ate that stuff up. Why wouldn't they have? They didn't have to change a thing they were doing, and black folks were going to help them. In 1895 in Georgia, Booker T gave a famous talk that was known afterward as the Atlanta Compromise speech. He said about blacks and whites, and all things that are purely social, we can be as separate as the five fingers, yet one as the hand in all things essential to mutual progress. White people clapped at that till they couldn't feel their hands. Washington told blacks in the South that they should forget about going somewhere else to make a new start. They had opportunities right where they were. He said, to those of my race who depend upon bettering their condition in a foreign land, or who underestimate the importance of cultivating friendly relations with the Southern white men, I would say, cast down your bucket where you are. Cast it down in making friends in every manly way of the people of all races by whom we are surrounded. Cast it down in agriculture, in mechanics, in commerce, in domestic service, and in the professions. Of course, now it probably would surprise you to hear that not all black people saw things the way he did. Some black folks heard what Booker T was saying and doing what white folks needed doing, and they said later for that, the 14th Amendment said, I'm a citizen. If I'm a citizen, I've got rights, and I should be able to do what I want. Forget about trying to do what the white folks need. That mess ended with slavery, or should have. Why have I got to try to be useful to the white man just so he won't treat me worse than he treats a dog? I've got my own life to think about. I need to be able to vote. That's my right as a citizen. If I want to spend my life studying philosophy or French or art history, I need to be able to do that. What I want doesn't have a thing to do with the white man. One brother who felt that way was William Edward Burghardt, or Du Bois, or W.E.B. for short. He was born in Massachusetts in 1868. Talk about a black man getting educated. After he got a degree at Fisk University, Du Bois went overseas to study in Berlin. Then returned and became the first black person to get a PhD from Harvard University. That man had brains coming out his ears. One of Du Bois' books is The Souls of Black Folk, which you need to read if you haven't. Du Bois didn't like what Booker T. Washington was saying, and not just because he thought black people should be able to do whatever he wanted. The way Du Bois saw it, if all you told black people to do was work, and work some more, you weren't making them into machines. You were making them into machines instead of people. In an essay called The Talented Tenth, Du Bois wrote, if we make money the object of man training, we shall develop money makers, but not necessarily men. If we make technical skill the object of education, we may possess artisans, but not in nature men. Men we shall have only as we make manhood the object of the work of the schools. Intelligence, broad sympathy, knowledge of the world that was and is, and of the relation to men, of men to it. That is the curriculum that higher education, which of that higher education that is the curriculum of that higher education which must underlie true life. So I think we are familiar with the differences in position of W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington. That's a big thing that's a big known thing among that time frame. Booker T was hitting it from one angle, W.B. Du Bois was hitting it from another angle. But that's no different than when we had the same kind of duality with Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. They're hitting it from different angles. And I don't see anything wrong with that. You're going to have a portion of the crowd that's going to go with the thought leaders. You're going to have another portion of the crowd that's going to go with the labor leaders. That's just kind of how it is. But at least we had people fighting for our rights, right? Fighting for our rights. So this chapter, Solidarity, is all about these organizations that developed to fight for Black solidarity. So next, Dick Gregory is going to talk about the founding of the NAACP. This should be interesting. Founding the NAACP. What's going on, Vivian Reed, man? Loki, Sick, and Sauce up in the house, man. Thanks so much for joining. Miss Bethany Rucker, Grand Rising to you. Make money for other people. The founding of the NAACP. In our Black History series, guys, looking at Black history or history itself through the eyes of the late, great Dick Gregory. Let's read. Whew. All right. In the 19th century, Black folks couldn't win for losing. Things looked good for a while. In 1863, President Abraham Lincoln announced the end of slavery with the Emancipation Proclamation, and the slaveholding states that made up the Confederacy lost the war in 1865. It was a new day for Black folks, or at least it seemed that way. Reconstruction started, but was short-lived. Black folks didn't go back to being slaves, and we still had the legal right to vote because of the 15th Amendment, which got passed in 1870. But that didn't stop Southerners from harassing Blacks at the polls and making us take all kinds of stupid tests before we could get anywhere near a ballot box. So Black people could vote, but we couldn't vote. Now, it wasn't enough for some white folks that Blacks were prevented from voting or serving in office. Because Black people weren't slaves anymore, we were getting jobs that whites felt entitled to. Whites didn't like that a bit. Plus, how could white folks feel they were better than Black folks if Blacks were free just like them? Some Black people had even been congressmen and senators. A lot of white folks didn't like that either. They started getting resentful, as if they were the ones who had something to be resentful about. They got so pissed off at Black people that they started lynching us. Between the mid-1880s and 1900s, more than 2,500 folks were lynched. Most of these were Black folks, and most of these lynchings were in the southern states, and those are just the ones we know about. after they finally started keeping track. It wasn't just lynchings either. Sometimes whole black neighborhoods got burned down. If word got out that some black person had done some white person wrong, even if it hadn't happened, the next thing you knew, there was a white mob beating and killing the accused black person, torching his house. It didn't happen just in the South either. In Springfield, Illinois, in 1908, a couple of black men accused of rape and murder, which they hadn't committed, were transferred from one prison to another before a mob could lynch them. That upset the mob so bad they burned up $200,000 worth of black folks' property. That was the racial climate at the time. The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, or the NAACP, got started. Folks talk about climate change. Some climate changes, some climates change, some don't. Everybody put a console NAACP. In 1909, the year after the Springfield riot, a group of black and white folks decided that enough was enough. Matter of fact, the white folks were the ones who called the first meeting. Only a handful of black folks were involved at the beginning, including Mayor Church Terrell, Ida B. Wells, and W.B. Du Bois. Still, it wasn't as if black folks hadn't been active in our own defense up to that point. In 1905, Du Bois and another black man, William Monroe Trotter, had started the Niagara movement to oppose discrimination and fight for black people's rights. But half the fighting the group did was with one another. They couldn't agree on which candidate to support for president or on other issues. Things got so bad that Trotter left the group in 1907. And by the time the NAACP formed, Du Bois told the handful of members left in the Niagara movement to throw their support behind the NAACP. Du Bois headed up the NAACP's magazine, The Crisis, which is still being published today. Now, hard as they tried, the NAACP couldn't get Congress to pass anti-lynching laws. There were too many racist congressmen and senators for that, and even if they weren't racist themselves, some of the voters in their districts were, and those voters had long memories. The NAACP did publish a report, 30 Years of Lynching in the United States, 1889 to 1919. That became the talk of the land and helped lead to a decline in the number of lynchings. The NAACP had its national office in New York City and field offices in Boston, Washington, Detroit, and other cities, and then it spread out even more. In the 1930s, when the Depression hit and the whole country was suffering and blacks were suffering worse, NAACP fought to get black folks jobs. The NAACP was also behind the cases that got combined in the Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas in 1954, which was when the U.S. Supreme Court decided that school segregation in the Constitution didn't see eye to eye. Since then, the NAACP has been involved in activities ranging from the civil rights movement to the fight to get more black characters on TV shows like The West Wing. So this is the founding of the NAACP. Again, going through the eyes of the late, great Dick Gregory. Man, interesting stuff, man. Interesting stuff. All right, so he's going to cover another organization here that you guys might be familiar with, the Urban League. So this is the Great Migration and the Urban League. Everybody putting comments on the Urban League, another organization created or developed to fight for black solidarity. Let's read. In the 19th century, most black folks in America lived in the South. Early in the 20th century, we started moving north and west. And a whole lot of things made us move. Here's one. Right after the Civil War ended, the southern states, starting with South Carolina and Mississippi, passed the black codes. Among other things, that meant that if you were black and got called a vagrant, you would get arrested. It was pretty easy to get called a vagrant. Black people had to have written proof of employment on us at all times. And if we didn't, we could get arrested. We had to sign work contracts. And if we tried to get out of those contracts before the end of the year, we had to pay back the year's wages or get arrested. And not only did we have to work and prove we were working, but there were only a couple of kinds of work we could do. In South Carolina, if you were black and wanted a job as anything besides a farmer or a servant, you had to pay a tax, which most black folks couldn't afford. That way, white folks had guaranteed labor. Besides, who did you think you were trying? Who did you think you were? Trying to be something besides a servant? You uppity nigga, you. What happened when black people get arrested? That's the beautiful part. We still had to work, but now we had to do it for free again. Just like in slavery times, it was called convict leasing. Prisons were lease convicts, would lease convicts out to companies for mining work and other dangerous, dirty jobs, and the convicts didn't get paid a cent. The only difference between that and slavery is this. If a slave master owned you, he didn't want you to die because he paid money for you. But if you were a prisoner and got worked to death, there were plenty more. But if you were a prisoner and got worked to death, there were plenty more where you came from. And when racist whites weren't trapping you, tricking you, and arresting you, they were up and killing you. So if you were black living in the South and all that mess was going on, the North and West would have started looking pretty good, right? The only problem, besides having to leave behind your home and everything you knew, was the white bosses didn't want to let you go. They had other plans for you. It's nice to feel wanted, but not like that. So you couldn't just walk into work one day and tell your boss, I quit, going up north. Goodbye, you old racist dog, you. If you try to do that, the boss will find a way to put you in jail or kill you. No, you had to get slick about it. Pretend you were just going for a drive and hop on that train and not look back. So now you're up north or out west, along with the more than 500,000 other blacks between 1910 and 1920 alone, had enough sense and balls to hightail it out of the South. Things are better where you've gone to, but it's not like New York City, Chicago, Philadelphia, or Los Angeles held a ticker tape or parade for you and put up banners reading "Welcome, Negro Friends." Black folks still had to face the big three: segregation, discrimination, and poverty. In the only parts of town black folks could go to, we got charged too much money for places that were falling apart because landlords knew we couldn't go anywhere else. Racism in housing and racism in employment, racism in education, it was all there waiting for us. Just like with the NAACP, black and white folks got together and decided that that crap wasn't acceptable. For a while, it seemed that for every black person who had come north, there was a group trying to help them out. The Committee of Urban Conditions Among Negroes got started in 1910 in New York. Of course, we had already had the Committee for the Improvement of the Industrial Conditions Among Negroes in New York, which had come along in 1906. And did I mention that the National League for the Protection of Colored Women had been founded in 1905? Eventually, they all merged. But the new name, the National League of Urban Conditions Among Negroes, wasn't too much better. So in 1920, they shortened it to the National Urban League. That's more like it. And that group has been around ever since, helping black folks fight discrimination in education, jobs, housing, and healthcare. The National Urban League. So now you guys know kind of how the National Urban League got started with all these different groups that have formed to fight for blacks. They all came together, merged, and came up with a cool name that's actually still around today. So we're talking about Urban League has got to be over 100 years old. NAACP's got to be over 100 years old at this point if we're in 2020. And we're talking about early 1900s. So these are organizations that were formed to fight for the rights of black folk and are still around today fighting for racial equality and all that good stuff as well. So kudos to them, man. I'm glad. I never knew how the Urban League was formed. So good to hear it from brother Dick Gregory to get some of this good information, man. So tonight on our Black History series, guys, we had our inventor of the day, Otis Boykin. 26 patents. We answered. Had a question, 101 question that you never thought to ask about Martin Luther King Jr.'s blindfolded dream and the impact it had on black folks' rights or black rights. And we just covered the first portion of chapter 2 for Defining Moments by Dick Gregory on solidarity. And he's going to continue to go along talking about these different organizations as we move forward in chapter 2. And I think we might, I don't know when we might finish it up, but we'll just keep plugging along, just keep chugging along in our Black History series here on the New Black Wall Street Book Club, where black folk do read. If you put in a book, like African American Inventions That Changed the World by Mr. Michael Carson. If you put it in a book, like a Black History Reader, 101 Questions That You Never Thought to Ask by Mr. Dr. Claud Anderson. If you put it in a book, like Defining Moments in History, Reading Between the Lines by Brother Dick Gregory, we absolutely will find it. I'm your host, ERGJ, your certified financial educator, and I want you guys to remember this, that it takes a village. It starts with us. Let's build as we climb together. We all we got, beautiful people. Matter of fact, we all we need. And thank God that's more than enough. Until next episode, you know what time it is. Mr. DJ, hit the music.
New black, new. It's the New Black Wall Street Book Club. With your host, Evan Jefferson. It's time for us to go. Yeah. Now you ain't gotta leave the computer, but we encourage you to get out there and learn and apply all the things you learn at the New Black Wall Street Book Club. Yeah. The New Black Wall Street. The New Black Wall Street. Book Club.